Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on today, wrapping up with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Mobius, Blues by Geordie Greep. We have done one other track by Geordie, I think it was Holy Holy, off of this same album. I definitely remember that exceptionally colorful album art. And I remember it being rather complex, which makes sense. I think Geordie comes from Black MIDI, while also being incredibly dense lyrically too. Let's see if that's continued on with this track, Blues. Let's dive in.
You're all grown up, you have your own stove and your own pair of oven gloves. You have arrangements and assignations. You keep up appearances and have a reputation. You sit in a park and work on your sonnets. You talk about yourself in the past tense. You have opinions that can't be shaken on Mara's firm. Do you know what I mean? 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 Is your favorite turn of phrase? You know what I mean? 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 Is your second favorite turn of phrase? Speak English better than anyone, and you can curse like no one ever has done, and you have a bigger dick than any man who's ever lived, and you can come more than 100 stallions in a room that smells of cigarettes and carry on under sheets freezing cold with damp. You voyage far and wide across plain and ocean, step on marsh on celestial bridges and knock down doors and climb in windows and listen in and listen. Can you hear that? The sounds of life, not yet awake, the stirring, the screwing up of eyes, a blanket that forms mountains, the valley between knee and cheek, the steep slide down to the feet, the toe poking out. Be careful, don't touch, have discipline, my boy, just watch. Stay outside in the cold. And you can feel it, you can feel it, you can feel it, see? There's a universe in this room, you scrounger of toilets and pillager of tombs. You don't have to work because working is for schmucks. You know God will light your way. You are ready to admit to murder, to assault, to robbery, to pederasty, to fraud. You are ready to take the blame for every crime of all men. But the jury is out to lunch. You imagine a roaming camera that captures your melancholy. You walk the streets that stink of disease. You turn up your collar like James Dean. You put your right hand under your jacket and pretend you have a gun. You put your left hand under your jacket and pretend you're Napoleon. You squeeze your spots till they bleed. You turn your face so no one sees. Do beggars still play accordions? You should pay one to follow you around and play your theme. Soon your nails will sin. Soon your earrings will shrink. Soon your organs will grow little mouths and speak for themselves. Soon your body will stage a civil war. Soon your heart will burst out free. And soon it will look you in the face and ask, what have you done? Why have you led it astray? Soon your brain will migrate. Soon your walls self-castrate. Your
that's the same arpeggiation from the guitars at the beginning of the track. Well, how do we have minimalist maximalism? By the end of this track, we have a lot of things going on. There is some synth over here that's arpeggiating. There is the the rising and falling, and then that is increasing in pitch as the new floor is higher than the old floor, and it just keeps changing, increasing in pitch. There's the drums that have just been incredibly energetic this entire time, but now going ham. We have the opening guitar part being present also, but I think that's harmonized now where it hasn't been prior. There's some horns going on, just holding out some notes. I think there's a guitar off to the side that I vaguely heard just going ham like the drums, just throwing down a lot of sound. There is a lot going on, but honestly, there's not. I think that's the really interesting thing about this. It always sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's projecting. A lot of this to me is production side of things. These instruments sound big because they are produced to be big. The guitars are large, are loud. The horns are large. Those horns would not be able to compete with a distorted amplified guitar. All right, so this is just a normal thing of production, balancing your instruments so that you can hear everything, even if that's not how it would be in person. But here, I think if you removed all the production, you would end up with something kind of empty. And I think a good place to look at this is the beginning of the track. The first minute or so sounded like there's a lot of things going on. But there wasn't. We had two instruments on the side, we had a drum kit, we had the vocals. The two instruments were quickly arpeggiating 4 notes up and then 4 notes down. These would occasionally, I believe, unless I'm misremembering this with what they were doing at the end of the track, but they would sometimes shift in pitch, collectively taking all the notes in it, rising them all up the same distance, and then bringing them back down, following a chord progression. But even if they weren't, we're just looking at 8 notes total, 4 up, 4 down. They are quickly played, those 16th notes. It creates something that feels frantic. It creates something that feels cluttered. There's no room for space here. The drums are giving us a lot of energy with its syncopation and kind of using the whole kit, the toms, the snare, the bass kicks, multiple cymbals. It's a very maximalist delivery, but if we actually listen to the rhythmic pattern of the drums, that's also a bit on the simpler side. If you pick out the accent points, not a lot going on there. Everything else is superfluous to the core thing. The guitars sound busy and complex, but they're not. And the fact that we just hear this one lick over and over and over and over for multiple minutes, there's just not a lot that it's saying past what it says the first time. This actually started to wear me down a little bit. I was expecting something on the noisier side. Geordie doesn't always work within that, But again, coming from Black MIDI, there's a lot of noisy elements in that sort of forward-looking punk style. I think this is the closest thing to Black MIDI that I've heard from Geordie's solo work. But it is very noisy. But it is simple noise. It is just there. It says something and then it just says that over and over and over. The next section, I think, embellishes this factor. It feels like we've lost everything. The volume comes down, the layering comes down. Instrumentally, we just have quarter note hits, I think. Ba, 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 ba. But to be fair, this isn't that different from the previous arpeggiation. The only difference is, instead of rising and then falling, we're just locked here. But the idea of heavy repetition is present. A lack of chordal movements, having an ostinato that does not change, being repeated ad nauseum. From here, we bring back the opening arpeggiation, and then we shift to a different type of simplicity. This one not really as quiet, but not as bombastic as we will be. And this is the layering, the build up into the end of the track. This is really a song of 4 sections. The opening motif, the low end contrast to that, the opening motif again, and then an expansion on that quieter section with an escalating sort of slow burn into the finale, which wraps up on that opening ostinato. It ends the same way it begins. This song doesn't actually change much at all. And I think that's what I take away from it. I don't really think I enjoyed it. Part of it is that a lot of it does lean on the sonic side of things. It is cool because of its noise, because of the timbres, because of the textures. It isn't something, though, that I find interesting melodically or really even harmonically, rhythmically. Yeah, the drums in particular have some really cool patterns to them, and there's a ton of syncopation on this track. But most of the instrumentation, the pitched instrumentation, is just the same things. Constant 16th notes, constant quarter notes, constant eighth notes. It's just find a consistent beat and stick with it. There really isn't a lot of syncopated ideas on this track outside of the drum work. The vocals end up feeling very folk influenced. It's spoken word. He's telling a story. He's reading poetry to me alongside the noise. He's not singing within it. He just happens to be saying something, and there's some music that goes, that's playing next to him. But it doesn't feel as incorporated as even something that's a bit more sing-songy, but certainly nothing that's sung or harshly sung in the music, where you can feel that the vocals are a part of the whole. Now, the vocals do occasionally find phrasing that pairs with the instrumentation, but around the halfway point, when we kind of lose an element of phrasing entirely and we're just focusing on this escalation of sound and noise and cramming as much as we can into this space, the vocals get overshadowed by the music quickly, and the vocals stop really doing things synergistically with the instrumentation. And so I didn't find myself really gravitating towards the vocal work at all, because it's just talking to me. And musically, pretty much once you've heard the first 30 seconds, you've heard the song. Everything else is either a reduction, a minimalization of that opening idea, or an expansion, a maximalization of that opening idea. It doesn't really change much. I enjoyed it for a first time listen, but I don't think I'd come back to it. The last one we checked out, which I still think was Holy Holy, but y'all can let me know if I'm misremembering the title. I do remember the music video took place in like a bowling alley or something. And I remember the music to it too surprised me because it was distinctly not as black MIDI as I was expecting, while still having that punk attitude and expansive writing. But I think I enjoyed that one quite a bit more than this. And ultimately, I just don't think this one clicked for me. It's an interesting focus in repetition, uh, iteration, and expansion. But as far as enjoying myself, like a non-academic view on it, I didn't really find much to latch onto and have fun with during it. Let me hit some lyrics. So I might come around on this a little bit based off of the lyrics. I think the music does a great job of showcasing this idea. I mentioned that the music was maximalist, but not really doing much at all, almost as if it was a facade, um, a distraction. This song is about someone who has this social projection of being important and smart and well kept and perfect, but that they're really not. Our narrator, though, has quite an opinion of this person, and the song ends up being sort of a hit piece towards them. At the beginning, it cheekily mentions how mature they are. You're all grown up. You have your own stove and your own pair of oven gloves. What a wild way to kick this song off. To call someone grown up because they own a stove. I don't know, that feels really biting to me. And it was from this moment, I read 2 lines, was like, oh, snap. This is going to be sarcastic. And it is. I think it fairly well retains that sort of language and perspective throughout. It says you sit in the park and you work on your sonnets, you talk about yourself in the past tense, and you have opinions that can't be shaken, morals that are firm. Implying that they see themselves as stoic, too smart to have their mind changed. It says, do you know what I mean? 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 Over and over and over. It says it's your favorite turn of phrase, with your second one being, you know what I mean. I think this is interesting. The first one implies agreeance. Asking if they agree with you, if they have the same perspective as you. To know that your thoughts and opinions are accepted. The second, though, is an indication that this person intrinsically believes that whoever they might be talking to does agree with them. There is no question here. You know what I mean. You're in the same group as I am. You and I were on the same wavelength here. These are certainly used for 2 different groups of people, and I'm sure it's however the other person is perceived by this smug person that our narrator is talking about. Verse 2 really goes into this idea of how this person believes that they're so great. It says you can speak English better than anyone, and you can curse like no one has ever done, and you have a bigger dick than any man who's ever lived. It says despite all of that, though, you just sit in bed and masturbate. Now, it doesn't say that outright, but it does use some interesting visual metaphor for a blanket that has a mountaintop right around the middle of the person's body and drapes down at either sides towards the toes and the head. It calls this person, though, someone who is a voyeur of life, not really living it, peering into other people's lives and believing it to be their own, calling them a pillager of tombs and a scrounger of toilets. It mentions that this person doesn't believe they need to work. but that they are ready to admit to murder, assault, robbery, fraud, anything. They will take every blame for every of mankind's sins. However, the jury is out to lunch. I'm not 100% sure on this one. This entire track is heavily commented on over at genius.com. I don't know if I agree with what's going on here, but it does seem like this person is performative. They would openly and publicly admit to any number of heinous things, as if to say that they would do anything for attention. It says, however, the jury's out to lunch. No one's listening to his confessions. It says, you imagine the Roman camera that captures your melancholy, and you walk the streets that stink of disease. You turn up your collar like James Dean, and you put your right hand under your jacket and pretend to have a gun. It's trying to be cool, trying to act manly. Violence, weaponry, this is all pretty cool, right? But it's fake. It's all play. It's just fingers under a jacket here. The turning the collar up like James Dean is trying to appear cool, but our narrator just doesn't see any of these qualities in this person. The fourth verse explains how this person's body will eventually revolt against him. Your nails will sing, your organs will grow little mouths and speak for themselves. Your body will stage a civil war. Your brain will migrate, your balls will self-castrate, your feet will scuttle off, and your hands will fly away. Your eyes will glue themselves shut. So embarrassed to bear your name, your body will vanish out of shame. Absolutely wild stanza. For the most part, I really assumed Geordie was just singing about a generally vapid person who wants to or projects this idea of being more than what they are. Here, though, this type of animosity, it's not general. I feel like Geordie's singing about a very specific person here. But there's no details given, so I don't know. Verse 5 says that the first step is acceptance. Just admit you have no idea what you're doing. You have no ambition. You sleepwalk through life. Admit that your best dreams involve being carried. Just admit that you're fine not leading everything, not being the most important person in the room. It says admit that you tried to cry, but you can't. But admit these things to yourself. There is no one else who cares. There's no jury present, no reporters, there's no examination. It's just you. It says you'll disappear. Soon your lips will unwrap and expand. You'll be able to pull them over your head. Your veins will spring off of you and spread out for miles. And very soon you'll disappear. You'll be fine though. Just relax. Soon you'll disappear. And that's the fact. As if to say that maybe it's the sheer fact of life, that death is a part of it, and no matter what you try to portray of yourself now, eventually you'll be forgotten. But I think it's also the idea that any sort of popularity you have will be forgotten someday. Even as you age, maybe whatever you're doing for clout now, which seems important, who's actually going to recognize you in 30, 40 years, 50 years from now because you acted cool when you were 20? Again, this seems very directed. There is a lot of animosity here, and what originally comes off of as, you're just not as important as you think you are, turns into some very, very raw descriptions towards a person. But this idea of someone who thinks that they are cool and popular and tries to do the stuff that they think would make them look cool and popular, but they're really not on the inside. They live a life alone by themselves and peer into other people's worlds. That could be an analogy for social media, or it could just be a voyeuristic tendency to people watch out in, everyday life, never really engaging with humanity much. The music does a really great job of capturing the type of bluster and bravado that these types of people have. A very physical, visual display that they are important and mean business, but that ultimately they've got nothing to back that up. The music ending up being incredibly simple and repetitive and not really having much of value besides its look, its size, the fact that it feels big and overcompasses the vocals by the end of the track. It actually doesn't have anything to say beyond just puffing out its chest musically. At least these are my thoughts on Geordie Greep's Blues. What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this track? Let me know. Put all of that, as well as anything else you'd like to add, into the comments section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.